Okay, so what is the gig economy, right? Despite kind of all this talk on AI, right, and the jobs it may or may not take from us, in 5, 10, 20 years and so forth, their demand for freelance tech is certainly growing, right? As employees look for kind of niche skills and employees demand more flexibility, right? In the post-COVID era, we all want to be flexible, and a lot of people are turning to gig work to be able to do that. The global gig economy was like 204 billion last year. It's set to grow 17% this year, and that's like 58 million Americans who identify themselves as gig workers, right? In its simplest form, kind of the gig economy is a labor market that relies on kind of part-time positions filled by contractors. In the 80s, you would never dream of getting in a vehicle with a stranger and driving from point A to point B, right? You would never dream of that. But here in this day and this decade, we have Uber, right? I've been in town like 48 hours and I've gotten in 6 strangers' cars already, right? Which back when I was kind of born, that was never a thing. So we tend to think of like Uber and DoorDash when we think of gig work, right? But certainly lots of, developers, QA folks, graphic designers, all kinds of industries are turning, to gig work for the flexibility and the scalability of that. Technology is enabling that, right? Certainly unique opportunities for employment matching workers to tasks, which is really what we're doing in the pen test space. Companies like Malaysia, Kosovo are actually encouraging this, right? They are offering training for youth and for kind of low-income areas in order to bring them into the kind of global gig economy. So this is going to certainly continue to boom worldwide. Before we kind of jump into like the gig economy and community principles and how they can help you scale and keep that quality, I'll give you like a little bit more detail on what I do and kind of what pen testing is and the community that I manage. So my organization, Cobalt, provides pen testing at like a pretty significant scale. For those not familiar, a penetration test or a pen test is kind of a simulated an authorized attack on a computer system, right? It is somebody who's authorized to go forth and find those vulnerabilities and present them ultimately to our customers. Offensive security in general is the practice of actively seeking out vulnerabilities before a hacker does, right? Versus defensive, which is just as it sounds, responsible for the defensive measures, looking out for monitoring, detecting, and responding to the threat. So both of those pieces are important, in having a good security posture. And pen testing is a pretty big piece of that offensive security posture, right? You have to know where your holes are in order to plug them ultimately. So I joined Cobalt back in 2021 after spending 6 years at what I kind of call a legacy pen test provider. The company is Rapid7. Some of you may be familiar with them. They're a pretty big name in the space, but they were doing it like the legacy way, I like to say. They you sign a statement of work as a customer with them, right? You join a wait list to get a resource, which takes sort of 6 to 8 weeks. You have to then go through the pen test process, requiring lots of resources on both sides. You get to a debrief call, and then you get this very clunky PDF report that you just are told, like, hey, here's this 50-page thing, go forth, create tickets, fix all these things, right? Cobalt does it slightly different. We call that PTAS. So we coined that term, pen testing as a service. And so it really combines kind of the human element of pen testing with the dynamic element of a platform that supports that, right? So it gives you the ability to kind of see your findings real time as your pen tester is finding them, integrations for tickets, things like that really make that kind of dynamic. But how do you get to the space where you can deliver hundreds of pen tests at any given moment, and then add another one sort of at any point with 24 hours notice, right? We do that through 450-ish highly skilled penetration testers who work for us, from around the world. While the gig economy, certainly is the basis for our delivery at Cobalt, scaling still comes with immense challenges, right? Even though we're able to tap into that global market, how do you kind of keep quality from 4 to 40 to 400 folks, right? At 4 pen testers, maybe one project manager can oversee that and make sure that they are keeping up with our, kind of expectations and quality delivery. At 40, that gets a little tougher, but maybe a handful of folks can oversee it. At 400, it all goes out the window. The trust model doesn't work anymore, and you have to kind of be much more creative on how you, scale that and keep the quality and keep consistency for your customers. So that's a little bit about pen testing and what we do, and a little bit of the community that I manage. And I should reference, I'm using the word community, but I think you can interchange that with team pretty regularly here. So don't kind of overthink that. Think about your local team, the people that you work with, and some of these things as well. But what is community management as a discipline, right? Community management fundamentally is a discipline that focuses on building and maintaining relationships with groups of people with common interests, right? I'm sure that you can all think of communities that you're a part of. This is a community at PNSQC for sure. But in the business sense, there are kind of a few categories for that. Support is one of the biggest, right? With the goal to improve customer support and satisfaction, right? Reducing support costs. Think Apple support, right? Like you're going in there, people are answering each other's questions. That serves Apple and others really well, creating that community. Acquisition, the goal to increase brand awareness, right? Grow market share, drive traffic. Contribution, where the goal is kind of motivate and accelerate content creation. Certainly, there are lots of kind of gaming communities and article creating companies that do this. Engagement, and then ultimately, customer retention, right? Having a community that keeps your customer constantly seeing your brand and engaging and expanding with you certainly, helps with the renewals and all of those things. So because of this, in a business sense, community management is typically like categorized as a marketing function. But how can those principles that we apply to our customers actually kind of transfer to scaling a technical team and scaling your operations? So let's kind of talk like, why is community important, right? Why does everybody want to have a sense of community? Community is a very broad term. If you ask 100 people what community means to them, you will get 100 different answers. It could be, it's my neighborhood, right? It's my religion. It's my sports team, if that's your thing, right? People have different kind of meanings of community to them. I think experts have certainly, kind of spent decades trying to define that feeling you have when you're in a community. One of the theories that I like the most is called the sense of community theory, and it describes community as a feeling that members have of belonging, right? A feeling that members matter to one another and to the group, a shared faith that members' needs will be met through their commitment to the community, right? Through giving something, your needs are met in return. And this theory kind of presents 4 factors that contribute to that sense of community. So a feeling of belonging, right? Boundaries. You got to know who's in your community, but also who is out, right? And that might sound a little harsh, but we'll talk about why that's important. And then, of course, logo branding. That stuff is really strong in creating that sense of belonging. Sense of mattering, right? Because your community members need to know that they have influence over the community, over the direction, of your organization, and vice versa, that their opinion is heard and action on. Integration and fulfillment of needs. Needs are met in order to make the investment worth the return, right? If you think of this like you join a knitting group to master a stitch, but also have a social experience out of that. Did you get that in return? Otherwise, your community isn't meeting your need, and you're not meeting your members' need as a community manager. And then, of course, shared experiences and stories, right? Genuine shared emotional connection and experiences is incredibly important, right? Just in general. So, foundations for scale. Now, well, we've talked about community management discipline. We've talked about why it's important. Let's kind of look at how you can leverage some of this information at scale. And I think we have to go about the foundations of this. And certainly, if you're interested in the gig work piece, this is a little bit more applicable. But skills at scale, like you need a rigorous vetting process, right? It goes without saying that your people have to be able to do, what you say they can do. Some of these, may seem a little bit more obvious, right? But you need to have the necessary skills. For Uber, that's the ability to drive from A to B and work their app, right? At Cobalt, that is the ability, certainly to pen test, 4 years experience, demonstrated experience in the space. We vet their ability to write a report for us, for example, leadership skills, right? We have a very rigorous vetting process. We kind of shout loud and proud about only accepting 5%, the top tier 5% of folks who apply to be in our community. And while, the sense of community is important and you want to kind of be inclusive, at the same time, there's a lot of value in kind of having barriers to entry, right? It's important for people in the community to know who belongs and that they're working with like-minded people and having the same experience. So kind of that there's this principle of effort justification, right? The more you have to invest your time and whatnot for the outcome, the more invested you are in that. And we really believe that certainly at Cobalt vetting our independent contractors. They have to put the work in and certainly prove their ability. And in return, right, they're working with like-minded people and we're meeting that sense of community. So if you're scaling, kind of contractors, you need a strong independent contractor agreement. I won't go down a rabbit hole here because there are lots of lawyers who do that for me, but don't skimp here. Make sure that this covers all your bases, all your policies, all your expectations that they need to abide by. Certainly legal help on these is very important. Then, of course, offer them courses, guidebook. We have, a work ramp course, certain guidebook, handbooks that certainly instill all of your expectations of working as part of your community, right? That should be updated regularly. It should be shared frequently. It should be a source of information constantly for your contractors or your team. And then onboarding, it kind of seems a little gimmicky to talk about onboarding, but when we join companies, right, you want your onboarding swag box to come in the mail. You want your stuff, and onboarding certainly, is a big piece of this. It's kind of the first step in gaining their investment in your community and showing them that you're invested in them, right? So think about what you want them to know as part of their onboarding, but also how you want them to feel, right? And then enlist from them the next action, right? A lot of times this is go forth in the Slack channel and introduce yourself, right? Or connect with this team member, elicit actions that start to get them engaged. Because often people kind of onboard and they sit in the background and they wait for that to happen. But the stronger you can be in that, certainly the better. From there, creating an identity for your community is essential. It's kind of like it gives members a feeling of belonging, right? A purpose and a shared direction. But more importantly, it also creates those boundaries, right? Members know who is in, why they're in the community, and what they need to do. A well-defined kind of identity helps people feel connected to something bigger than themselves, right? You should be able to answer, who are we? What do we believe in? And what is it we do as a team, right? And answering these kind of simple questions will help you better articulate the social identity to current and prospective members of your community or team. For Cobalt's community vision, it's kind of a shared passion for securing our customers' assets, right? It is making the internet safer in general, right? Security practitioners, certainly hackers, really resonate with that in general. It's in a space where it's imperative to be a lifelong learner. All of our pen testers, our hackers have to be wanting to constantly learn because the landscape changes constantly, right? So we really resonate and work to align our community and our organization in general with the identity of highly skilled testers working to secure our customers and in turn, the broader cyber landscape, right? And that's how we answer those questions, and the actions that we take for our community service those, right? And we always come back to that. Another kind of key piece that, I think is often not overlooked, but maybe utilized a little bit differently is rewards, right? A key piece of maintaining engagement is rewarding contribution. You want people to engage, you have to recognize that. But rewards should really be earned more than gifted. Everybody loves swag, especially in the tech space, right? But swag that comes with a milestone comes with a memory, right? And that's stuff that people are going to resonate with. It holds more value for the receiver if it is tied to a memory or a milestone. Right. Gamification and reward can kind of be, a tricky line. Trying to drive quality work from your community through extrinsic rewards can come off falsely, right? You really have to make sure that they are tied to those. They should be a symbol of proof of a member's investment in your community. And a status, right? It should be a privilege to receive that versus a blanket kind of approach with these things. By incorporating like game elements, points, leaderboards are really big in the security space, especially with like bug bounty folks, badges, things like that. Community managers or managers can motivate members, but also retain members, like while encouraging that participation, right? Really recognizing their efforts to give to you, and in return yours to give to them. I love this one. This will hack for tacos is a really popular core swag that we have at Cobalt. Rewards at Cobalt kind of come in a few different ways. We have like tester levels, right? A promotion. Visibility for thought leadership is a really big one. Are they writing blog posts, and can Cobalt publish them? That for them. So visibility for that thought leadership, and of course, the swag with our various kind of logos. We do the milestones. For example, you get a swag pack when you complete 5 tests at Cobalt, and then the backpack and the challenge coin at 100 tests or whatnot. So milestones prove really effective in retention for us. Testers want to meet their next milestone, right, and kind of prove their numbers on the leaderboard and things like that. So rewards is kind of a big piece, not to be overlooked. And then kind of collaboration, community champion. So what is a community champion? Think of an environment or like a community that you're in. One for me is a fitness app that I use, right? They have a Facebook page, and there are certainly community champions in this group. They are the ones who are posting their protein shake recipe. They are the ones sharing their workout or whatnot, and just generally kind of cultivating discussions. And then you can kind of identify and nurture these people, these champions, and leverage their influence and expertise to drive, positive change. We kind of do this in 2 ways at Cobalt. We have kind of a more organized community champion in our pen tester advisory board. So this is a group of our testers who make a 12-month commitment to meet with us monthly, give us feedback. We give them insight into Cobalt's, strategy and next steps, direction, and vice versa. So they become, Cobalt champions in the formal sense of we make them that way, right? And we call them out to the community and present them as members who should receive the community's feedback. But we also have kind of organic champions, right? People who have large social media followings, in the space, or speak at events, or just generally are the type of characters that are in our Slack channels, cultivating discussions, right? Commenting regularly, recognizing those people and highlighting them in certain ways. Like the picture I have here is a blog post. We do this kind of get to know a pen tester thing is really important. And it resonates with a lot of people, and just kind of finding those people, recognizing them, cultivating them, make sure they're on the track in your community can be really strong. So once you kind of recognize and use those people for feedback, then you have kind of this immense like collaboration and joint decision, right? As we talked about, having that feeling of community in the sense of feeling heard, getting that back certainly is imperative, and that works really well with Cobalt Champions. And that kind of vibe just spreads, right? As I say, think of a community that you're in where you can think of that person who really resonates with the group, and that kind of aura just spreads. So conflict resolution and policies, right? Like policies goes a little bit without saying, I suppose, but community management at scale requires effort and resources, right? Certainly, I have a team, a couple of community managers who oversee all of our resources, but it's imperative that we pay close attention as a group to conflict resolution, right? It's crucial for maintaining a positive and respectful environment, kind of for obvious reasons, but at scale, this gets harder to do, right? By addressing disagreements kind of promptly and fairly, we prevent escalation and foster kind of trust, right? Members really need to trust each other and the organization to maintain faith in the community. At Cobalt, we use a three strikes rule, so gradual sanctions for performance management. For example, small violation may result in a strike, whereas a severe issue in an environment would result in offboarding for our community, right? And while it's our job to do that for our customers, it's also very much our job to do that for our community and our team of testers as well. They want to work with people who work well and deliver top quality, right? They want to work with good peers. And so recognizing that is really important. I learned kind of the importance of proactive performance management with contractors at this scale pretty quickly. Performance-based management used to be at Cobalt very um, escalation based, right? We were waiting to hear of the problem, and then we were certainly taking action on that. But we've very much shifted to how can we recognize these behaviors in the community early, and we leverage our community champions and things for like that, right? It's a full cycle, of those folks helping us maintain that quality piece in the group. So clear policies certainly, and we talked about the kind of independent contractor agreement and making sure that those are clear. But again, it's just fundamentally important to make sure that you are documenting your expectations for your team, right, and that everybody knows and is on the same page of what you expect from them. So let's talk a little bit, another kind of principle in network adoption and support, right? And in this context, I'm talking exactly about events like this, right? Especially in the hacker community, we encourage participation for our community members at external events. Certainly, network adoption and support is bigger than just the community of folks that I have, right? While my 450 testers learn an incredible amount from each other, we want them to go out into the world, and do all of these great things and share their experience and vice versa. So encouraging, participation events. For those of you not familiar, DEF CON and B-Side conferences are security conferences. DEF CON is just ginormous. It's in Vegas every year, many, many thousands of people, but an incredible experience if you get the opportunity to go. B-Sides are smaller, more local conferences that we have a lot of people in our community that host, that speak at, right? And we want to foster that. We want to sponsor those if we can. We want to see them speaking. We want to sponsor them going to DEF CON or speaking at RSA or other events in the space because it's incredibly important. Content and recognition, right? We partner with our marketing team for content creation pretty heavily, right? We recognize our core community on social media. We want to share their blog posts, right? Because again, and that's a way for us to notice and return what they are doing for us, right? And create that sense.
Yeah. I understand you manage a community of folks that provide testing as a service, but your clients, wouldn't they be concerned that when folks discover issues in the penetration testing that there's too much discussion of that among the community?
So there are yes, that's a great question. And we have lots of NDAs in place, right? The testers in working on a pen test are not allowed to disclose the information for that customer to anybody else in the community. So part of our platform is they can only see the test that they are assigned and previous tests, right? If they're working on retesting findings, and they're not to share that in the community. There are lots of ways to demonstrate findings while kind of obfuscating that, right? You can seek CVE, for example, and have your finding investigated, validated without exposing the customer. And that's a little complex and you need some legal support there. But ultimately, our expectation is that they're talking about this in principle, but never sharing customer information. Okay, so we talked about network adoption support a little bit, sponsorship, really putting out there and making sure that you're fostering those relationships amongst not just within your community, but externally, the broader community, which for us is cybersecurity. But how do you do all of this and know that you're doing it well and that it's making any impact, right? If you're doing all of these actions, you kind of need to start with a strategy for your community. The kind of takeaway I have up here, it's a guy named David Spinks. He wrote The Business of Belonging, which outlines 3 levels for community strategy. The business level focuses on how the community drives revenue, if that's your goal, right? Or aligns with company goals. We don't at Cobalt necessarily say like, hey, X action produced X revenue from our community by any means. But certainly, we can demonstrate that those actions ultimately lead to having the top tier of talent, more findings, right? Ultimately lead to a better quality experience for our customer. The community level, concentrate on community growth, right? Engagement, health of that group of people. And then the tactical level is certainly specific initiatives and improvements to achieve these outcomes, right? Like I want to produce 7 more blog posts, let's say, in Q3, right? The very tactical things that you want to do to foster that sense of community. So I really highly recommend David Spink's book. He is the founder of Bevy, which is a really well-known community platform. If you're interested, I've read quite a few books on the space, and his is definitely one of the best that kind of resonates across industries. Okay, so let's say you've got a community strategy. How do you measure that you're doing that well? Right. The community maturity model that you're seeing here is from a company called the Community Roundtable, but there are lots of these out there. You can kind of Google, maturity models for community. This one I think is kind of one of the simplest, but I also encourage that you can customize these, right? You may have more weight in the kind of content and programming piece, and you might weight that higher than some of the other things here. So you can customize this model really to kind of how you need it to be. But this offers kind of a framework for you to say, yes, implementing all of these actions is moving me, in this example, towards a more networked community, right? We are empowering our community managers, or we have inclusive policies and governance, right? And again, whatever you weight, you put on those. So, and again, there's lots of these out there. You can kind of Google and read different frameworks and essentially design your own, but it's important to have some metrics to see that scale and see your efforts and what you're producing from that. So I think that's really it. I hope that kind of the community management principles that we've kind of run through help you see how, scaling a team, and ultimately the goal is to create a space where, there are shared connections, right? And how in turn those shared connections and return of that can help you build an inclusive group that wants to give you a quality output, right? You're intrinsically motivating them to want to give you quality work versus the more traditional approaches of obviously making sure that all of your OKRs and things are met, but really creating that sense of community can drive, so much quality in using those different strategies. So that is everything I have, but I would happily take some questions either about pen testing space or sort of community management and the crossover that I see.